welcome to Her Excellency, Ambassador of Bad Rising. Thank you for joining us today for this fireside chat. We don't have a fire, but we will have one in our hearts as we talk, and look forward to just talking about some of your own experiences and background, particularly with Suriname, but also your experiences in the diplomatic corps. So thank you for joining us today. So the first question is, can you share where you grew up in Suriname, and if you have any fond memories of your childhood that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And let me first start to commend the the China Garden Foundation for organizing this event, and it is incredibly important also because of the recognition of the Asian Pacific and American Heritage Month. I think it's a laudable initiative. To answer your question, I grew up in a suburb of the capital, 20 minutes away these days because of traffic, in a predominantly Indian, Indonesian community. Fun memories, I have a couple, but one of them, and I think I will make you laugh, was climbing in trees for fruits. You see, that neighborhood where we lived in, it's a very green area, and many families were having their home gardens, but always full of fruit trees everywhere. And the children of the neighborhood were always very much engaged. I mean, Suriname is such a sociable society, so all of us would have expeditions
Right.
to go and pick fruits even from other people's garden, but they would just
sure they
laugh.
appreciated
would just
that, right?
laugh, you know. But that is one of the one of the most memorable memories from my childhood. But another one that I would like to mention within this context is the fact that the celebrations of our national holidays.
Right.
And one of the most fun ones is what we call Holy Pagwa, the Festival of Colors, where entire neighborhoods and children, they would celebrate Holy Pagwa and play with each other with colors and water
terrific.
and mud and whatever is available. So those things were very nice, and these days you don't do it anymore for so many reasons.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. And you know, building on that, do you have personal experiences which inspired you in particular to go into the diplomatic corps?
Now, I have to give you a little, like a minute of a background as to how. Well, I'm the fourth generation of Indians in Suriname, and the time that I was a teenager, my grandparents were still alive, and you grew up in a society and in a culture where the role of women it was still pretty conservative.
Right.
So it took a bit of time to convince your parents and family around you, because all of us grew up in a very strong cultural setting, that we wanted to do something else. My father always wanted me to become a teacher, and the argument behind that was that if you are a teacher, you can teach. In the afternoon, you will be at home, you can raise your children, you can take care of your husband. That was the ideal job for Indian women of my generation.
Right.
I wanted to study history. That was always my fascination. My passion for travel and history and cultures has always been there. My dad always said that I would end up poor if I become an historian. and he had his perceptions about archaeology and history, because on the land of his brothers, where they had they were farmers, and they
Right.
had land, huge areas of land where they were doing farming. But it turns out that that was the area where the indigenous people were living
Okay.
of Suriname. So once they were farming up there, they discovered that there were huge archaeological sites up there. So he knew from that period that archaeology means bending all the time
Right.
in the heat, becoming
Right.
very dark,
Right. More than farming. Right.
yes, and just looking for
Right.
small artifacts. So that was
Right.
not an ideal position.
Right.
Now, so I went to, I grew up at home, becoming very interested in international politics and in international relations because my father was working at the radio station.
I see.
So you can imagine the entire day, that radio station, it was a national radio station, was blasting through the house. So you
Right.
hear the news.
Covering every topic, yeah.
Every
Right,
topic of the
right.
world. So that basically started to instill my interest in the world and in politics and in international
Right.
relations. After, well, I went to university, I studied law, and I decided to do my thesis on international labor law. And why was that? Because it was at the time in the early 1980s where you had this entire movement of freedom of association
Right.
in the entire world. And in South America, you had a period where dictatorship was coming to an end. So I was part and parcel of an environment where you are aware of what is happening. So basically, that started to instill my interest for international relations, and I went to study international relations, and from there on, started to specialize.
One thing led
further.
to another.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Where did you go to school?
So I studied law at the University of Suriname, but when I wanted to do my specializations, I went to the Netherlands. That was our former
Okay, sure.
colonizer, and I specialized further in international relations at different universities in Chile, but also through the United Nations, UNITAR Institute. I did international security in former Yugoslavia. And later on in life, I felt that I have to do something more to understand the developmental problems of the world much better. And I went to study at an international university in the Netherlands. I did international development. Let's say when I was like a mid-career diplomat, I decided that I want to study more into the nitty-gritties of diplomacy and conflict resolution.
Right,
And at that time, I went to the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy,
Sure. Yeah.
where I finished another master's and worked at Fletcher in international negotiations for another year.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite an educational history.
Thank you.
So even though you're not a teacher, you've obviously you might as well be because you've seen a lot of education. Maybe it'd be good for those hearing this to hear a little bit about just your broad experiences in the diplomatic corps and what a day in the life of a top diplomatic official is like.
Yeah. So I have a dual accreditation to the United States. I'm the ambassador of Suriname to the Organization of American States, but also the ambassador to the White House. I'm very proud to say that I'm the first female that has been accredited to the OAS and to the United States since our independence, and that was in 1975. So you can imagine there are always eyes on you as to how you perform, right? So it is quite extensive, the work that we have to do as ambassadors, especially in a dual position. And Also, if you have to take into consideration that small countries like mine
Right.
has limited resources, so you work with smaller embassy staff. That means you have much more to do because you do not have enough staff and resources to delegate everything. So basically, my day starts with scanning the newspapers,
Right.
the national newspapers and the international newspapers, listening to the news, to what is actual. And basically, why do we do that? That is to detect in a very early hour during the day if there is something up there to which my government should pay attention
Right.
to. That is most of the time that I start first with, and I start to send direct, but I don't want to use the word instructions, but I
Sure,
start
yeah.
to direct my staff that they need to print documents.
Prepare themselves, yeah.
Print
Yeah.
documents, prepare themselves, put dossiers together, look for other documents so that you can start to build up substantive information for a debriefing to your capital, or for conferring with other colleagues who might have the same interest. Then, of course, I would look into the emails, which every day is a painstaking process because you have to deal with so many emails,
Right.
be it bilateral or multilateral. And then, of course, you follow, if something important is happening, you have to follow those developments. Meetings, daily meetings are pretty time consuming, and as you know, for every meeting you have to do substantive preparation. Within the Organization of American States, for instance, you have different regional groups. And Suriname, for instance, is in the group, I don't know whether you have ever heard of it, but it's called CARICOM.
Yeah, sure.
The Caribbean Community
of
is it's a regional organization of 14 member states,
Right.
and we confer on a whole lot of political issues, and quite often we try to determine a unified position for something.
Right.
So before you come to that position, that means you have to do your substantive preparation, understand the issue, see whether it will conflict with your country's position or not, because at the end of the day, diplomacy is about serving your national interest.
Of course.
So you have to make sure that it doesn't conflict with your own national interest. That takes quite some time depending on the complexity of the issue. And then, of course, quite often you have to make quite a number of phone calls to your capital and to the relevant authorities to determine a position, writing statements,
Right.
impromptu statements and small interventions to share your country's position on a certain stance, especially in multilateralism that is of high importance. Bilaterally, of course, there are so many developments going, but if I have to use an example, for instance, let's say in the bilateral sphere, we have a major interest when we talk about climate change. So that means everything that is being dealt with within the United States when it comes to developing a new climate change policy
Right.
is of interest for Suriname.
Of course.
So we follow the developments, and then of course my reach out to potential investors, dealing with investors who are already in the country, people who want to have more information, who want to meet with you, want to talk about the economy, about the sectors in where they can invest. That takes quite some
course,
time
yeah.
as well.
Right.
And then, of course, we have public diplomacy. I mean, fireplace chats like this. And then you have quite often, well, now with COVID a bit less, but before COVID, you always have quite a number of formal and informal meetings with different people
Right.
from different sectors here in the United States, be it government officials, officials from the World Bank, IMF, IDB, from the OAS, from State Department, lunches, working lunches,
That's a
working
lot to fit in one
dinners.
day, right?
Yes. So depends.
So clearly every day is a little
Yeah.
different, but
Yeah, but of course,
starts the
now
same
with
way.
now with COVID, a whole lot is happening virtually,
Right.
which is, as you know, kind of time consuming, and it takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And it's a different it's a different time set and a different mindset that you have to put together to deal with Zoom meetings. So that's a day.
That's a
Every
full
day is
day.
busy.
That's a full day. That's a long day.
Long day.
Well, I'm sure there are many of these, but do any moments stand out in your mind as the most challenging, and then perhaps the most memorable for you?
Okay, let's start with the memorable first. I think one of the most memorable was presenting my letters of credence to the President of the United States at the White House.
Yeah.
That's a nice moment.
Yeah.
For any diplomat.
Of course. Yeah.
And for a female ambassador as well. I mean, there are 193 ambassadors accredited to the White House, and you have approximately 31, 32 female ambassadors.
Right.
So I think for every female ambassador, it's a memorable moment. In terms of challenges, I mean, working with small staff and with many responsibilities that you are entrusted with is it's challenging every day.
Right.
But Suriname had a leadership position within the Organization of American States. I was the chair of the Permanent Council for 3 months and serving at the same time the Permanent Council is the major political body of the organization, and basically during that period of time you lead the organization. But at the same time, we had the responsibility for another council. So it was a dual responsibility at the same time.
Right.
And before I was entrusted with the responsibility for presidency of the Permanent Council, I was the vice president as well. So I had a 6 month of leadership position, and then another 6 months.
Right.
Almost simultaneously. So that was kind of challenging.
Right. Yeah.
To make sure that you perform effectively, efficiently, and that you gain the respect and trust of the 34 plus member states
Right.
of the Organization of American States. All went well. It was a very,
Clearly.
It was a challenging period, but I learned so much more from that period in terms of dealing with politics, dealing with diplomacy, dealing with the substantive matters that an organization has to deal with, and more importantly, to make sure that you are a proper and trusted facilitator of a process.
Right.
Yeah. Thank
That
you.
can be challenging, yes.
Yes.
Is there any one thing you miss about not living in Suriname right now?
I would say 2 things.
You can't go to the fruit tree next door anymore.
The cuisine. Surinamese food is just very exotic. I cannot say that we have only one dish that stands out as the national dish. You are aware of the fact that Suriname is one of the most diverse countries of the continent. So our cuisine is so integrated because it spans a multitude of diversity, be it ethnic, be it linguistic, be it religion, but cuisine as well. And we have like Surinamese Indian food. We have the traditional Creole dishes. We have the Indonesian dishes.
Oh my goodness! So
You have the mix match of it. You have Amerindian dishes. You have Maroon dishes, and then of course, the entire. Potpourri that comes along with
Right,
it as
right.
well. So I miss the cuisine, the spices. We love spicy food.
Right.
We have Indian food as well, of course. So that is one of the things that I miss because you cannot find all the
Can't find
spices
it all
up
here. Yeah.
And the other thing that I miss is, well, through the years I have established quite nice friendships and sociable relations in the United States, also because I studied here. But in Suriname, it's a very sociable society. Friends are like family.
Right.
And it's a small society. It's a small country, relatively. I mean, the population is close to 600,000.
Right.
90% of the 90 plus, I should say, percent of the country is still forest. Most of the population live along the coastal areas, but you can imagine, like in every neighborhood, everybody knows everybody.
Know everybody, right?
And you have sport clubs and other clubs, so you meet up there and. Life is different because the office hours, let's say public office hours in Suriname are from 7 till 3 o'clock. So you have the entire afternoon for yourself. I mean, not for
Right.
people like us. I mean,
you don't have that here.
No, but also in Suriname, more responsibilities means that you have to spend more time
Of course, right.
to deal with those responsibilities. But you can make more free time for yourself, I think, in Suriname. So I miss the social life
Just the type of-
sometimes.
yeah.
But other things make up for it up
Right.
here, right?
Well, actually, that's interesting because, I mean, you grew up in a multicultural environment, and you're probably very attuned to it. But as a diplomat, obviously, you have to involve yourself in other cultures when you get an assignment. You've obviously been here for quite some time, but do you have a method for learning the culture of a country you've been assigned to, or do you just absorb it naturally from your background?
Yeah, I think more from the second. You absorb it, but I do think, well, I was lucky enough because I studied here. But I think it is important for everybody to start with an open mind for other cultures.
Right.
And for everybody who has to serve in another country, be it a diplomat or being as a business executive or academia in another country, it is important to learn more about the culture. But let me start first by learn more about the history,
Right.
the culture, and the norms and values
Sure.
that
yeah.
are abided by in those societies.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, everybody wants respect for their culture,
Of course. Yeah.
and everybody wants you to abide by what is common in their country, not only from a law perspective, but also as to what is accepted and not accepted in those societies. So you have to be aware of it.
Yeah.
When it comes to the United States, if you have to come and serve here as the highest envoy of your country, and the highest envoy of the president, I should say, it is important for you to know how the public sector of the United States
Right.
functions. So
Right.
you have to read
Which is
about
complex.
Congress. You have to read about Congress.
Right.
You have to know about the various committees. You have to know how the structure of the administration is. You
How
have
policy is made,
and
how
how
it's- right.
policies are being made.
Right.
How important it is to understand the process before a bill is being proposed. You have to know what drives certain things. So understanding processes from the point of view as to where you are going to serve is of high importance. And of course, you need to find out as well how you can function within such a context.
Right.
Because if you are coming from South America and from the Caribbean, you have to understand how the Caribbean is perceived, which entities and organizations are the best to approach to make
your point. Right.
to make your
Yeah.
point, but also to make sure that your national interests are also
Of
being
course,
served.
right.
So it is always a learning process. And like in my own country and like in the entire world, governments change, administrations change,
Right.
people change.
Right.
So, well, people change in terms of their positions. So it is important that you are aware how policies in this country are changing.
Right.
And always be mindful that there are rules and regulations and norms and values attached to every society.
Right. Yeah.
So you better make yourself acquainted
Right.
to that. Yeah.
Totally understand. It's interesting, Suriname is, as you say, one of the most multicultural countries in your region. And with Asian American Heritage Month being celebrated here, are there similar types of cultural celebrations that celebrate particular cultures
Yeah.
in Suriname,
Yeah.
or is it
Yeah. So you
sort of
will be
all blended
surprised.
together?
You will be surprised if I tell you that we have national holidays. So Chinese New Year is an official national holiday. Eid al-Fitr, on the occasion of Ramadan,
Right.
is a national holiday. Eid al-Adha is when they, what is it called? Eid al-Adha it's making offerings to the
Right.
poor. It's a national holiday. Holy Pagwa is a national holiday. We have Indian Day, which is a
Right.
national holiday. Maroon Day is a national holiday. So we embrace cultures. I would say that the social cohesion in my country is exemplary. I think one of the best in the world. You will have areas, and we always use that as an icon. You have a mosque and a synagogue next to each other,
Right.
just in the same lot of land. They use each other's parking lot together.
It's a good lesson, right?
It's a good lesson. It's a good lesson. So very, very integrated, and we celebrate it extensively, enthusiastically, and wholeheartedly, each other's holidays.
Yeah.
So within the context of Asian Pacific Heritage Months, for instance, that is one of them. And I mentioned Diwali is, for instance, another one where we celebrate, everybody observes those holidays, and it is very respected nationwide.
That's terrific. And, it's great that you can serve here in the U.S. Where we have similar things. And it's great to hear your experience in Suriname and how they've dealt with it. As you think back on your career, is there any advice you'd give, particularly to young females who might be considering, the diplomatic corps as a career, or representing their country in different roles? Is there any anything you might pass along to them?
I think a couple. First of all, whatever you do in life, and that goes for diplomacy as well, you have to be curious about what is happening in the world. You have to, diplomacy, international politics, international relations require that you are well informed all the time, because developments are evolving all the time. Situation of a week ago might differ today. I mean, this morning, for instance, I was listening to analysis of the situation in the Middle East, and more specifically on the Israeli-Palestinian issue.
Yeah.
And things are evolving so fast.
Yeah.
You know, this morning there was a lot of reporting on the talks between the U.S. and Russia, and I love the word that has been used, and that is that those relations are developing on the basis of practical diplomacy. Right? What does that mean? Practical diplomacy basically indicates that at the end of the day, the national interests of countries need to be served.
Need to be served, yeah.
So everybody who enters the arena of diplomacy and serving his or her country has to remember that at the end of the day, you have to make sure that the national sovereignty of your country is being upheld.
Right.
And that the national interests of your country are being served. That require that you study. You study into disciplines that can be of relevance, be it law, be it international
Right.
politics, be it international relations, be it history. You will never stop studying, because you will find that there is always room to learn more and to learn more about other disciplines, because at the end of the day, everything is interdependent. Almost
Right.
every discipline is interdependent.
Right. And national
even-
interest is multifaceted.
Yes,
so yes.
even studying architecture is important, because that will make you understand the history of the
Right.
world. One of the other things, be committed to what you do and make sure that you excel in everything you do. And make sure that when you enter the area of foreign policy and diplomacy, that you build on social skills, that you build on learning languages. My official language is Dutch. I speak some English.
Obviously. Thank you. This would be very hard to do in Dutch.
You know, but learning languages opens doors for everybody. And understanding the history and culture of countries open doors as well.
Right.
It helps you to build relationships. And at the end of the day, a relationship building and creating trust is very important in diplomacy as well. So there is a lot of work that can be done. It's a process, and I would also advise not to become too impatient. Everything has its time. There's like we say, ripeness in life, ripeness in diplomacy and in a certain profession makes you more attuned to bringing about a balancing act in diplomacy, understanding a matter better, judging a matter in a more mature manner.
Right. Well, Ambassador Bad Rising, thank you so much for taking time today. You've had such an
Yes.
exemplary career, and it's been an honor to have this time with you and to celebrate Asian American Heritage Month together. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Bad Rising, do you have any thoughts or advice on how young people in particular could work to help strengthen U.S.-China relations?
U.S.-China relationships are evolving, right? And again, I will touch upon the importance of national interest. China is becoming a bigger power in the world. But I would like to mirror this question against how Suriname and China and how young people helped to build that relationship as well. I mean, there's one level when we talk about state-to-state relations, but this specific question, I think, relates a whole lot to people-to-people relations. In Suriname, for instance, you have what they call friendship committees.
Right.
Suriname-China friendship committees. We have, for instance, the opportunity for young people, but also people within the public sector, that they can be engaged in student exchanges, academic exchanges, and also cultural exchanges.
Right.
That basically goes back to the question that you asked earlier, and that is, how do you make sure that you can understand the culture of another country? This might be a good way as well, being open-minded for the cultures of other countries. China is becoming a power of more importance gradually. In Suriname, for instance, after the United States, China is the second largest trading partner. I'm going to share this experience with you. I have one son. He lived in Europe, he lived in the United States, and at some stage he wanted to study art. He spent time in Florence, and then he expressed his interest to do an academic study. At that time, I was very fascinated by the recent findings of the archaeological site in China. What is it called? The terracotta soldiers.
Right, sure, yeah.
And I told him, why don't you try to think of studying in Asia? And this opportunity was there. He told me, but Mom, I don't know anything about the culture of that country. I don't know anything about the language.
Right.
It is such a different society. I mean,
no better way to learn, though. Right?
How will I thrive up there?
Right.
And I told him, go and see the world. Go and explore the world.
Right.
Give it 6 months. If you don't like it, pack your bag, go and travel into Asia, broaden your horizon, and see where you will fit in life. Next year, it will be 7 years of studies in China, and he will graduate from the Central Academy of Fine Art. Basically indicating that it's not only art and history and language that you learn while you are in a specific country, but it broadens your horizon of the world. So
right.
I do think that young people need to be open-minded and go and explore the world, and that means being open to go and explore China and the wider country.
7 years and running, right?
Yes. And now he speaks Mandarin fluently. He even shares proverbs with me in Chinese and in Mandarin. And now he teaches me on the norms and values and the similarities between Hinduism and Confucianism. and Buddhism, and it is fantastic. I mean, these days, with that knowledge that my son has gained from a different culture, it is such a pleasure to
Yeah.
be in an exchange and to talk about life now, because he's so mature.
Right.
Because his mindset, his
Well, he can bring his
vision of
own
the
unique
world. And
experiences
he
to
brings
you,
a lot
right?
to the
Yeah.
table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good advice. That's
Thank you
very
so
good
much.
advice. Thank you again.
Thank you.